Israel's unprecedented attacks on Iran had at their core an elusive and high-risk goal: eradicating the country's controversial nuclear program. Israel targeted three key Iranian nuclear facilities and a number of top scientists involved in nuclear research and development. Satellite imagery and expert analysis hinting that the strikes had a significant impact in at least two of the locations. But much remains unclear, not least because Iran's most sensitive nuclear infrastructure is buried deep underground, and each side gave predictably contrasting assessments. An Israeli military official said at a briefing Saturday that strikes on Iran's nuclear sites in Natanz and Esfahan were able to damage the sites significantly, while Iran claimed that damage to the facilities was limited. That's not surprising. Pretty much every time you have any sort of conflict anywhere, you're going to have conflict. There's the PR battle and the actual battle that's going on, and neither wants to lose either battle. So neither is going to be truthful in this circumstance. I would believe Israel a bit more in this circumstance just because of their military capabilities and their position sort of in the Western world. That's not surprising. The whole nuclear supply chain has been disrupted. Ali Vaiz, the Iran project director at the International Crisis Group, told CNN on Sunday. Vaiz stressed the significance of each targeted nuclear site, which are all involved in the complex sequence of steps required to create a nuclear weapon. This chain is now broken, but it could be put back together in a matter of months because Iran has both the know-how and the material that is required for it. He cautioned this is not a blah, 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 blah. He cautioned this is not a program that will go away simply with aerial strikes. That makes sense. I mean, if Iran has the capability to build up these facilities in this supply chain, then just smacking them around a bit is not going to completely kneecap its ability to do this. It's just, gonna temporarily inhibit its ability to create nuclear weapons, which is probably a good thing, right? I mean, Iran is an insane theocratic, religious extremist, Sharia law, horrible government. And so, I mean, the idea of them having nukes is very, very not good. And so in a pure vacuum sense, preventing Iran from being able to build up nuclear weapons is a good thing. Yeah. My understanding is Israel did strikes all over Iran on June 13th. Natanz. Initial assessments indicate that Israel's strikes on Iran's Natanz nuclear facility were extremely effective, going far beyond superficial damage to exterior structures and knocking out the electricity on the lower levels where the centrifuges used to enrich uranium are stored, two U.S. officials told CNN. This was a full-spectrum blitz, said another source familiar with the assessments. I just have such a hard time imagining Iranian nuclear physicists. Like, for me, the idea of being to that level of scientific like knowledge, like if you are so smart and so advanced in science and so educated that you can create nuclear weapons and help develop Iran's nuclear weapon capabilities, I would think most of the people that reach that point shake off the chains, the burdens of the religious extremism that they may have been brought up in. So, I know it's not impossible for somebody to be really religious and a scientist or whatever, but there seems to be a very strong correlation or causation, I would argue, with the more science, the more education that you consume, and your willingness to believe in God and go along with religious extremism. And if Iran is inherently a theocracy, inherently a religious extremist government, I would assume that these nuclear physicists that are working there helping them develop their project had to have gotten education elsewhere in the world, right? They must have a more worldly view. They're not like some goat herder who just, all they've ever seen is the 20 square kilometers in either direction from where they were born, and they've been there for the 50 years, and all they do is herd goats, and they don't know, and they have no world. They have no worldly perspective on things. But these nuclear physicists, I'm assuming, had to have gone and studied elsewhere. They didn't learn how to do all this in Iran. And so they likely have exposure to they have a more worldly perspective on things. I have a hard time personally imagining getting to that level of education and then just being like, yeah, I'm just going to go right back to Iran, these religious extremist nut jobs, and help them develop their nuclear program. I just can't imagine doing that. And like, I know there's aspects of like, oh, it's your homeland and blah, 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 and you wouldn't understand and all those sorts of things. But like, the strikes destroyed the above ground part of Natanz pilot fuel enrichment plant, a sprawling site that has been operating since 2003 and where Iran had been enriching uranium up to 60% purity. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, weapons-grade uranium is enriched to 90%. Electrical infrastructure in Natanz, including the main power supply building, plus emergency and backup generators, was also destroyed. Electricity was knocked out on the lower levels where the centrifuges used to enrich uranium are stored. Wiping out the power to those parts of the facility is the most effective way to impact underground equipment and machinery. The loss of power to the underground cascade hall may have damaged the centrifuges there. Centrifuges are machines that can enrich uranium by spinning the gas at high speeds. These are machines that spin at the speed of light. If they are suddenly turned off, some of them might explode or suffer unrecoverable damage, Valles told CNN. There is no wider radiological impact. The level of radioactivity outside the Natanz site has remained unchanged and at normal levels, the IAEA said. However, due to the impacts, there is radiological and chemical contamination inside the facilities at Natanz, it added, though the levels would be manageable. There's also a stockpile of highly enriched uranium in Natanz, in one of the buildings that Israel could strike, but hasn't, Valles said. The risk there is an explosion could potentially turn that stockpile into a dirty nuclear bomb that would create radioactive contamination with disastrous environmental and humanitarian effects. So it seems, based on what this article is saying, it seems like Israel chose these sites in Iran to strike very deliberately, and that they had two other sites that they could have hit, or one other site, it looks like, one other building, very specific site that they could have hit, that held already enriched uranium, and that a more bad faith, less interested in trying to minimize civilian casualties and damage actor would say, oh, that's the perfect target, because we hit that, we just bomb it regularly, and it turns into an even bigger bomb, turns into a dirty bomb for us. And that's just a win-win. But it seems like, based on what this article is saying, that Israel said, no, we're not going to do that. We're only going to go after their sites. We're not going to create a dirty bomb here by bombing their building with all their currently enriched uranium, because that's just, it's the negative consequences of that are too much. Equipment at two facilities, Natanz and Isfahan, had been moved in anticipation of the strikes, a claim that CNN cannot independently verify. The facility was, that wouldn't surprise me too much. It wouldn't surprise me too much if they caught wind that this was going to happen in some way, shape, or form, and were like, guys, let's get the actual expensive, important equipment out of here, all right? The facility was built with support from China and opened in 1984, the NTI says. According to the nonprofit, 3,000 scientists are employed at Isfahan, and the site is suspected of being the center of Iran's nuclear program. It operates 3 small Chinese-supplied research reactors, as well as a conversion facility, a fuel production plant, a zirconium cladding plant, and other facilities and laboratories, the NTI says. At a Saturday briefing, an IDF official said Israel had concrete intelligence that Iran was moving forward to a nuclear bomb at the Isfahan facility. Despite advancing its uranium enrichment significantly, Iran had repeatedly said that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes and denied that it was developing an atomic bomb. Yeah, I would have no reason to trust Iran about anything ever at all. So I have no faith when they say that that's actually the case. Now, I will say that for the Iran nuclear deal that we used to have in place with them, it did seem like, based on everything that we could measure and everything we could see, it did seem like they were following the rules. And to the extent that that program allowed them to do the peaceful uranium enrichment, nuclear program stuff that they were talking about, that program was a good thing. But now that that program, like, we have pulled out of that agreement years ago, and that program no longer is a thing, I have no trust in Iran in what they're saying. I would trust a third-party international agency to come in and check them like we did with the Iran nuclear deal. I do not trust Iran to check themselves and properly, correctly, honestly report what they're doing with uranium enrichment and their nuclear program and whatnot. No trust. Nobody should trust Iran to do that. Our fuel enrichment plant is a far more difficult site to target. The plant is buried deep in the mountains near Qom in northern Iran and houses advanced centrifuges used to enrich uranium up to high grades of purity. Iranian air defenses shot down an Israeli drone in the vicinity of the plant. The expectation has always been that Israel would not be able to reach Fordow because it would need the kind of bunker buster, massive ordnance bombs that only the United States has, Vaez said. Satellite imagery appears to support that assessment. Little damage appears visible in the image below. That makes sense. I mean, if it's way up in the mountains, it's going to be pretty hard to get like a real strike on them. So like, I understand if they're not able to get a real thing done on them. The Iranians are not complete idiots, right? I would imagine that if they're saying the Fordow plant, we don't expect them to be able to do anything to it because it's way up in the mountains and they don't have the bunker busters necessary and yada, yada, yada. And that it showed, and they shot down an Israeli drone in the area, tells me that that's where you would want to put all the actual important, expensive, equipment that you don't want Israel to be able to bomb. You'd put it in Fordow, and it seems like they're also putting their air defense systems there as well if they're able to shoot down an Israeli drone over there. That's probably where they're keeping all the bad shit is in Fordow. That makes sense if it's the hardest one for them to actually be able to attack. In 2023, the Vienna-based International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that uranium particles enriched to 83.7% purity, which is close to the 90% enrichment levels needed to make a nuclear bomb, had been found in Fordow. In 2023 they found that in Fordow. Okay, so then if they're at 83.7% purity in 2023 and like confirmed, which this is, then it's totally reasonable to assume anybody who would argue that Iran doesn't have a nuke or doesn't have the ability to make a nuke or whatever is not a serious actor if this is the case. I mean, of course they have the ability, and I think from a safety perspective, from a security perspective, especially from a conflict perspective, if you're in Israel's shoes, you have to just assume, yeah, they have it. Like it would be best to assume that they have it and then play as if they do, rather than hope that they don't have it and then play as if they don't. If Fordow remains operational, Israel's attacks may barely slow Iran's path to the bomb. James M. Acton, co-director of the nuclear policy program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, wrote on Friday. Acton said Israel might be able to collapse the entrance to the facility, but noted that destroying much more of the Fordow site would be a difficult task for Israel. Other targets. The Arak nuclear facility in central Iran appeared to ride out the first wave of Israeli strikes unscathed. That site houses a heavy water nuclear reactor, which has concerned the West because heavy water or deuterium oxide can be used to produce plutonium, a second pathway to a potential nuclear bomb. Attacking nuclear infrastructure was Israel's main objective, but its strikes also targeted a number of other sites associated with Iran's military and its secretive Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. A missile facility in Kermanshah, western Iran, took on heavy damage. The chief of the IRGC, Major General Hossein Salami, was one of the key military figures killed in Israel's strikes on Friday. This happened on the 13th, so Israel comes in and is like, hey guys, your military sites, we learned in 2023. I bet Israel has been planning to do this since 2023, since this 83.7% enrichment had been confirmed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. That's probably about the time when I would have expected Israel to start going, all right guys, we have to start making a plan for the next couple of years to wipe out their nuclear program. I mean, and it makes sense, right? I mean, Iran has been shit-talking Israel and talking about wiping them off the face of the earth for years and years and years. And so, I mean, if somebody's talking like that to you and they keep funding the proxy, like they fund the Houthis to the north of Israel, I'm sure they have some way that they end up funding Hamas and other resistance groups, right? I mean, it seems entirely reasonable to me that Israel would want to and has justification to go in and try and stop Iran from developing a nuclear program to develop nuclear weapons. Now, if you could have some way of parsing out them creating a nuclear program for energy, and them creating a nuclear program for weapons, then maybe I think Israel coming in and stopping the energy part of it would be wrong. But they're not doing that. They're coming. It seems to me, and based on the reporting that I've seen, they're very specifically trying to target nuclear facilities and military bases and whatnot. And that furthermore, they've done even further analysis on that and aren't just going wanton, oh, it's a nuclear facility, we're just going to start bombing it. They even said, we know this building has enriched uranium in it. If we bomb that, it's going to turn into a whole dirty bomb and screw up, the environment and the livability of the area for a long time. We're going to leave that building untouched. The IDF spokesperson said around 200 Israeli jets participated in the operation, striking around 100 targets. The operation, nicknamed Rising Lion, will continue. What a dumb name. Will continue for as many days as it takes to remove what he characterized as an existential threat to his country. Netanyahu said Iran has made enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs and has taken unprecedented steps in recent months to weaponize the material and produce a weapon in short time. He did not provide evidence to support his claim. We already have evidence of this, okay? The Israeli leader said that his forces targeted Iran's nuclear enrichment program, its nuclear weaponization programs, its main enrichment facility in Natanz, its top nuclear scientists, and its ballistic missile program. Defrin, the IDF spokesperson, said that the country had no choice but to attack Iran. Without presenting specific evidence, Defrin said that Tehran's nuclear program is an imminent and existential threat that could pose a global threat. Okay, yeah, so this basically sums up everything, my understanding of it all, up until that point.